Good morning and welcome to Dino-A-Day, episode number 10 with your host, Mr. Mike, brought to you by the Mechanicsburg Learning Center. Today's dinosaur is really cool. Looks a lot like the famous T-Rex, but it has some extremely interesting differences. If you look at this thing very closely, you'll notice right off the bat that this bad boy had horns. Horns right there on top of his head. It is, in fact, the only carnivorous dinosaur to have horns. Now, you remember Triceratops and Diceratops and Styracosaurus and all those animals with horns and strange things, but this is the first carnivorous theropod ever discovered that had horns. In fact, it was discovered in 1984 by a famous South American paleontologist, Bonaparte, named a year later in 1985. Now, because of those horns and the shape of its skull, the skull itself is kind of, squatty. It's not as long as T-Rex. So it reminded the scientists of a bull, especially with the horns. So the name Carnotaurus, for those of you that follow astrology, Carnotaurus, Taurus the bull, and Carno meaning meat, Carnotaurus means meat-eating bull. So, very self-explanatory in terms of the name. Dr. Bonaparte, thank you for that. This lived about 83 to 66 million years ago. 66 million years ago. That's a coincidental date, is it not? Yes, that's about the time a meteor came down, hit the Yucatan Peninsula, and boom, almost all of life on Earth was, boom, blown up, destroyed, gone. And that's when old Carnotaurus went missing too. However, there were some very interesting things left behind for us to discover about Carnotaurus. First of all, the fact that he had horns. The horns could have been actually larger than what we show because they were made out of keratin, which is what your fingernails are made out of. So these things, what's left over after millions and millions of years, show a horn this big. It could have been much larger, supporting something else that would have grown over top of it. So who knows? It could have been a longhorn. Also notice, when you look at this animal, you almost completely miss something, and that is its arms. Boy, we always make fun of T-Rex for having puny little arms, but this bad boy hardly had arms at all. Now, if you can see by how close I'm holding it, it did have a difference with T-Rex too. T-Rex had small arms. This had virtually non-existent arms, but it did have 4 fingers. Okay, T-Rex only has 2. This one had 4 fingers. But notice, too, the size of its thighs. Carnotaurus turns out to be extremely fast. These thighs, they believe the muscles on the thighs alone probably weighed about 300 pounds per leg. So it had a lot of muscle on its legs. Now, this was not a sprinter. I'm sorry, it was not a marathon runner. It was a sprinter. So it would take off after something, catch it, probably swallow it whole because, let's open your mouth there, Carney. Let's see. It didn't really have the strongest bite like you would associate with T-Rex. It had a bite that was roughly maybe twice the strength of a modern-day alligator, but compared to dinosaurs, that's really not very impressive. So it probably didn't go after big dinosaurs and attack them unless it was hunting in packs. Then it could have done that. More than likely, because it had a weak bite, it went after smaller things, gobbled them up, swallowed them whole. The other thing interesting about the discovery, and by the way, there was only one discovery. There was only one Carnotaurus specimen discovered, and so far that's it. So since 1984, we haven't found another one, which makes it again very unique. Luckily, it was so well preserved that we can see all these interesting physiological elements that the animal has. 4 fingers, 2 horns, kind of a weak bite, stubby face, and it also showed us something else. The back had interesting rows of bumps. Some of these larger ones are called osteoderms, okay, that you might see on the back of an alligator, but you don't often see that preserved on a dinosaur. Luckily, on Carnotaurus it was. As far as the horns are concerned, we believe that probably the male had the horns, the female didn't. Oh, You hear the budgie in the background? It's we have a present day dinosaur living with us. So the horns probably were not necessarily used for combat. They didn't happen to be probably the strongest things in the world. They were probably for display, and they were probably only on the male to say, hey, ladies, check me out. I'd be a good mate. So far, the other thing we learned about it is that its eyes faced forward. If you look at a T-Rex skeleton, the eyes are on the side. The Carnotaurus's eyes were more forward, which meant that it probably had binocular vision and had a better sense of a depth perception, which meant that it probably could spot things a little bit easier, had good eyesight. So it was very fast, but a weak bite. But good eyesight, but it couldn't take down big animals unless it hunted in packs. So let's go ahead and read you the story of the Carnotaurus from Dinorific Poetry, Volume 2, written by Mr. Mike, illustrated by my son, Ethan. That's what Ethan thought he looked like. Carnotaurus had a pair of horns above his eyes. Maybe they were ornaments or just a cool disguise. Maybe he would joust with friends or wave them while he ate, forcing other dinosaurs to sit around and wait. Carnotaurus had some truly interesting eyes. They were facing forward, not spread out on either side. This might mean his vision was acute and very clear, helping him detect some prey that strayed a bit too near. Carnotaurus had two arms like real genetic flubs. Now, let's be honest here and say they were little more than stubs. Each had many claws, and were they useful? We must doubt. Weirder yet, his tiny palms, maybe they were facing out. Carnotaurus had some massive, muscle-covered thighs, giving them the speed to chase down food most any size. Like a bull is how we would describe his massive head, but his lower jaw was weak, so who knows on what he fed. Now, Carnotaurus had some skin that left a rock impression. Rows of bumps went up and down his back in neat succession. Probably a means of some defense, they formed a line, each one growing larger as they headed up his spine. So, the Carnotaurus bones were certainly unique, showing that his legs were strong, but arms and jaw were weak. All of this is what we've learned by digging in the ground, and I, for one, can't wait until another dino's found. The Carnotaurus in Dinorific Poetry, Volume 2 by Mr. Mike, illustrated by Ethan. Thanks so much for watching episode number 10. Thanks again for all your shares. Remember to share this one with your friends who are interested in dinosaurs, and that includes adults too. We'll be back again 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Thanks again to the Mechanicsburg Learning Center for making this all possible. Have a great day. Another dreary day in Pennsylvania. See you soon.